Ready to dive deep into some Gandhi?
Absolutely, bring it on.
You've really outdone yourself this time. This collection of sources you set my way is fascinating.
It's a real mix, right? Articles, excerpts. We've even got Martin Luther King Jr. in the mix.
Oh yeah, talk about a meeting of the mind. So where do we even begin with all this?
Well, I think it gives us a chance to really get into Gandhi's life and his philosophy, of course, and how that nonviolent movement of his really impacted India's fight for independence.
And speaking of impactful, we can't gloss over that King piece, My Trip to the Land of Gandhi.
Oh, yeah.
It's like we're right there with him, you know?
Absolutely.
Getting to hear what he thought about Gandhi.
Yeah.
It was written in 59, right?
That's right, 1959 when King visited India. You can really tell that he's thinking hard about Gandhi's legacy, you know, like how it all fits in with his own fight for civil rights here in America.
You know what really struck me?
What?
The way King described the poverty in India, it's pretty hard-hitting. He even compares it to, like, the Great Depression in the U.S.
Wow.
He talks about all this hunger and unemployment. It's kind of jarring, you know?
Right.
Because you think about Gandhi's movement, and it's all about this, like, triumphant march towards freedom.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that winning independence didn't magically fix all of India's problems.
Exactly.
It's a good reminder. And for King, coming from America as he did, he was especially tuned in to, you know, economic inequality and social justice and stuff.
That's true.
It's actually super interesting how he kind of uses India as a way to hold a mirror up to America, you know, pointing out America's own issues, especially when it comes to racial segregation and the whole caste system.
And he even talks about this debate going on within India.
Oh, yeah.
About which direction they should head in.
Like, do they go the westernization route, embrace modernization, or do they focus on self-sufficiency?
Exactly. And that really echoes Gandhi's emphasis on Swadeshi, doesn't it?
It totally does. You know, it highlights that tension a lot of post-colonial societies deal with. How do you move forward and develop, but still hang on to your own culture and values?
That's a tough one.
It is.
And it seems like King was really grappling with that whole dilemma.
It definitely comes through in his writing, you know, like he's searching for answers.
Yeah, because he sees India wrestling with it firsthand.
Right.
And it just shows, like, Gandhi wasn't some lone figure in a vacuum or something.
Nope.
His ideas came from a very specific place and time.
Definitely.
Shaped by what India was going through in their fight for independence.
You're absolutely right. And if you want to really get Gandhi's impact, you got to get the man himself.
That's true.
His life had so many twists and turns. Like early on, he's a lawyer, trained in London, no less.
Oh, wow.
Then he ends up in South Africa fighting discrimination against Indians there. It's a wild ride.
And it's not just the big famous stuff like, you know, coming up with satyagraha.
Truth Force, right.
Yeah, that's it.
Powerful concept.
It is. But there are all these other kind of less known things about his life that really make the story even more interesting.
Totally agree.
Like, did you know he was a stretcher bearer during the Boer War?
No way.
Talk about a firsthand look at the horrors of violence.
Oh,
right?
yeah. That would definitely change your perspective.
And then during World War I, he's out there supporting Indian soldiers.
Yeah, wow.
Fighting in the British Army, of all things.
It's complicated, isn't it?
It is.
I mean, this guy was a hardcore critic of colonialism.
Yeah.
But he also seemed to think that maybe the system could be reformed.
It's like he saw the potential for good, even in the midst of all the bad.
Yeah, like he held on to some hope.
That's fascinating. So we've got this backdrop of these massive global events.
Yeah.
And then Gandhi's own personal experiences.
Right.
All shaping the way he saw the world.
Exactly.
But let's get down to brass tacks here. His philosophy. We've talked about satyagraha, but there's also ahimsa, right?
Wow.
Meaning nonviolence.
That's right.
And then swaraj, which is like self-rule.
Yeah.
And of course, Swadeshi, which we already touched on, that whole self-reliance thing.
Yeah, those weren't just some abstract ideas floating around in Gandhi's head. They were all connected, you know? Like these core principles that were the foundation of his whole movement for social change.
It was a whole system, like a philosophy for life.
Exactly. And to really get how powerful they are, we got to look at how they played out in specific events. Take the Black Act in South Africa in 1906.
Ah, yes, one of Gandhi's early uses of civil disobedience, right?
That's it. The Black Act was seriously discriminatory. It forced Indians to register and carry passes, almost like a preview of the apartheid system that would come later in South Africa.
It's crazy to think about.
It is. But Gandhi and his followers, they pledged to peacefully defy this law.
Wow.
They chose to be arrested and jailed instead of submitting to something they saw as totally unjust.
It's hard to even imagine doing that today,
I know, right?
Like breaking a law knowing you're going to get punished for it.
Yeah, but that's the heart of satyagraha, right? It's not about blindly obeying or just sitting back and taking it. It's about actively pushing back against injustice because you believe in the power of truth. And it means taking the consequences of your actions, but doing it with, like, courage and dignity.
It's almost like this moral force that drives you to act.
Exactly. And it might even mean making sacrifices.
Yeah, and that whole concept, it was born out of Gandhi's time in South Africa.
Right.
But it became a cornerstone of all his later campaigns in India.
Absolutely. And that's where things really started to heat up. Like in 1918 with the Quetta Satyagraha, those poor farmers had been hit with crop failure and plague, but the British government still wanted their full land revenue.
It's like kicking someone when they're already down.
It was a terrible situation, and that's when Gandhi and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel stepped in and organized this massive non-payment campaign.
Can you imagine? Thousands of farmers refusing to pay these unfair taxes, standing up to the British administration?
It
kicks a lot of guts to do that, especially when you're already struggling to make ends meet.
Right. And that's what makes the Quetta Satyagraha so remarkable.
It was more than just a protest, right?
It was an act of defiance, but it was collective defiance. It was based on this belief that even regular folks could challenge an empire,
Wow.
And in the end, the British government caved and made concessions to the farmers.
It's like a real-life David and Goliath story.
I know, right?
Except they use the power of, like, collective nonviolence instead of a slingshot.
Exactly, and it set a huge precedent for future campaigns because it showed everyone that Gandhi's methods actually worked.
And then, of course, there's the big one, the Salt Satyagraha.
Oh, yeah, that's the one everyone remembers.
Gandhi and his followers marching for 22 days to the coast just to make salt.
The Dundee March, it's become this legendary image of standing up to authority.
It is, and you think about it, just making salt from seawater, something so simple, became this symbol of resistance against British oppression.
And it captured the imagination of everyone in India.
It did.
And it kicked off a nationwide movement.
Millions of people joined in.
They boycotted British goods.
What?
They did all sorts of civil disobedience. It was a major turning point in the fight for independence.
For sure. But it wasn't just about political freedom, was it?
You're right, it wasn't.
Gandhi had a deeper vision, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He was aiming for a just and equitable society.
That's where Sarvodaya comes in, right?
You got it. It's about pursuing economic and social justice for everyone. Gandhi believed that true freedom meant more than just kicking out the British. It meant creating a society where everyone could actually thrive.
So it wasn't just a change in leadership, it was a much bigger transformation he was fighting for.
Exactly. And that's what made Gandhi's movement so powerful. It wasn't just about politics. It was about building a better world for everyone.
But let's not forget that Gandhi didn't do it all on his own.
Right.
There were other things going on that contributed to his success.
Oh, definitely. The political scene in Britain was shifting. People were starting to support the idea of Indian independence.
And within India,
the rise of Indian nationalism with figures like Bal Gangadhar Tilak created fertile ground for Gandhi's movement to take root.
It sounds like it was the perfect storm of factors.
You could say that. Gandhi was great at tapping into that energy, but he also understood that real change needs more than just political maneuvering. You gotta change hearts and minds too.
That's a powerful thought. And it sets us up to dig even deeper into Gandhi's global impact and how his ideas are still relevant today.
I think we're ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the tricky part, isn't it? Putting Gandhi's principles into practice in our own lives.
It's one thing to think they sound good.
Right.
But actually living by them, that takes real commitment.
Yeah, you got to really look at yourself, challenge your own assumptions.
Totally.
Your behaviors.
It's not just about big gestures or being part of some movement.
Right.
It's about those everyday choices. You know, how we treat our families, people at work, even strangers we meet.
It's those little things.
Choosing kindness instead of anger.
Yes.
Understanding over judgment, that kind of thing.
That's where real change starts.
Gandhi believed that changing society starts with each of us changing ourselves.
He was all about that personal transformation.
Yeah.
For him, nonviolence wasn't just a tactic, it was a way of life.
A whole philosophy.
Yeah, like how you exist in the world, you know? It affects everything.
It's like that famous quote, be the change you want to see.
Exactly.
We can't just sit around waiting for someone else to fix things.
We have to be that change.
We have to embody those values, starting with ourselves, our thoughts, words, actions.
Gandhi walked the walk, you know. He lived simply. He was all about self-reliance, and he never wavered in his commitment to truth and nonviolence, even when things got really tough.
That's inspiring, isn't it?
It is.
It shows that it's possible to live a life of principle, to stand up for what's right, no matter what.
Even when it's dangerous, even when it's hard.
And his example still inspires people all over the world.
It does.
Fighting for justice, challenging oppression.
Working for peace.
It makes you wonder, though, what Gandhi would think about the world today.
Oh, yeah. Like, how would he respond to things like social media?
That's a good one.
The climate crisis, all the division we see in society. I mean, it's a lot. It's tough to say for sure, but I think his principles of truth, nonviolence, and self-reliance, they still offer valuable insights. He probably wouldn't be a fan of all the misinformation and hate speech online.
He was all about seeking truth and promoting understanding.
Yeah, he'd probably want us to use social media to connect with each other.
To build understanding.
You know, to make positive changes in society.
Makes sense.
And think about climate change. He was really worried about the environment, you know. I bet he'd urge us to live simpler lives.
To consume less.
Exactly. And to protect the planet for future generations.
That was important to him.
Yeah, like living in harmony with nature, respecting all living things.
All connect.
And his emphasis on Swadeshi, that self-reliance thing, could totally apply to how we think about our economy today.
How so?
Imagine a world where we support local businesses more.
Okay.
We rely less on these giant global supply chains, you know. We could build communities that are more resilient and sustainable.
It's like taking back control.
It is.
Our own destiny, individually and as a society.
You got it.
So Gandhi wasn't just about tearing down what was wrong.
No.
He wanted to build something better in its place.
Right, and that's what makes his message so powerful. It's not just complaining about the way things are. It's about envisioning a better world and actually making it happen.
A world where things like peace, justice, and sustainability are at the forefront.
Exactly.
It almost sounds utopian, but you can't deny it's compelling.
And the best part, it's open to everyone.
It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you believe.
That's right.
Gandhi believed we all have the potential to change things, to make a difference.
Every single one of us.
That's a pretty hopeful message, don't you think? Especially now when everything seems so overwhelming.
It is hopeful.
Like all the problems we're facing.
Yeah, Gandhi reminds us that even small acts of kindness, courage, and compassion can have a ripple effect.
They can spread outward.
Yeah, create positive change way beyond ourselves.
Speaking of ripples, let's talk about Gandhi's global impact.
Okay.
We've mentioned King and Mandela, but his reach goes way beyond them.
Oh, for sure. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance has sparked countless movements all over the world.
Give me some examples.
Think about the civil rights movement in the U.S., the struggle against apartheid in South Africa, the People Power Revolution in the Philippines, the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia. You see echoes of Gandhi's ideas in all of them.
That's amazing. It's like his ideas traveled the world.
They did.
And inspire people in so many different places.
Right. And it's fascinating to see how all these movements, even though they were happening in totally different contexts, facing their own unique challenges, they all took Gandhi's principles and made them their own.
Adapted them to their own struggles.
Exactly.
Like the civil rights movement, for example.
Right. Martin Luther King Jr., he was hugely inspired by Gandhi's ideas of satyagraha and ahimsa.
When he was developing his own approach to nonviolent resistance.
You got it.
I bet it was incredible for King to actually see Gandhi's movement in action in India.
Oh, definitely. And remember, King and his followers, they organized boycotts, sit-ins, marches.
Yeah.
They faced arrest, violence.
It's incredible.
But they did it with such courage and discipline.
It must have taken so much strength to face that kind of opposition.
It did, and they got that strength from their faith, their commitment to justice, and their belief that love could really overcome hate.
It's a beautiful thought.
And their efforts, they actually led to some major changes. We got landmark civil rights legislation, segregation started to crumble, and the path towards equality in America opened up.
It shows that change is possible.
Yeah.
Even when it seems impossible.
You're right, even when you're up against these huge obstacles.
And then there's the struggle against apartheid in South Africa.
Right. Nelson Mandela, he spent decades in prison for his activism, and he always said Gandhi was a major influence on him.
It's amazing that he could find inspiration in Gandhi after all he went through.
I know, but Mandela really understood how destructive violence could be.
He had seen it firsthand.
Yeah, and he saw Gandhi's methods as a way to break that cycle of oppression.
It takes a special kind of strength to choose nonviolence when you've experienced so much brutality.
It does.
So what do?
They organize boycotts, strikes, all sorts of acts of civil disobedience.
Putting pressure on the apartheid regime.
Yeah, and even though they were met with brutal repression, they stuck to nonviolence.
They believed it was the only way to true liberation.
They were convinced.
And they were right, weren't they?
They were. Apartheid was dismantled, and South Africa became a multiracial democracy.
It's amazing.
It's a testament to the power of Gandhi's ideas.
Even the most deeply rooted injustice can be overcome.
That's the message.
It's inspiring.
It is, and these are just two examples, Gandhi's philosophy has spread all over the world.
It's given people hope.
It has. It's inspired movements for social change in so many different places.
It's a powerful legacy.
It is, but it's important to remember that nonviolent resistance isn't some magic bullet.
It's not always easy, and it doesn't always work, right?
Right. It's not a guarantee, and it definitely doesn't mean things will be easy or that there won't be sacrifices.
Sadly, that's true.
Think about the Tiananmen Square protests in China.
Oh, yeah.
Those peaceful protesters were met with such brutal force from the government.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. And then you have the ongoing struggles for democracy and human rights in places like Iran,
where people are risking their lives just to speak out.
Exactly. And these examples show just how risky and challenging nonviolent resistance can be.
Especially when you're up against regimes that will use violence to hold on to power.
You're right, and it takes incredible courage to stand up for what's right when the odds are stacked against you like that.
It does, but even in those tough situations, even in tragedies,
you still see Gandhi's influence.
You do.
It's there in the courage of those who stand up for their rights,
yeah,
their commitment to nonviolence, even when they're facing violence.
It's powerful.
And their belief that a better world is possible, even when things look really bleak.
That's hope, right?
It is, even in the darkest places.
So Gandhi's legacy is complicated.
It is. It's multifaceted.
It's a legacy of hope, inspiration, but also struggle and sacrifice.
That's right.
It reminds us that fighting for justice and equality is a long road.
It's a journey, not a destination.
And it takes unwavering commitment, courage, and compassion.
We're all on that journey together.
That's a powerful thought.
And as we think about Gandhi's life and what he left behind, it's important to remember how he influenced Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
Not just his thinking, but his activism, too.
I mean, King's trip to India in '59, that was a huge turning point for him.
Oh, absolutely. It was transformative.
It deepened his understanding of Gandhi's philosophy.
Right, and how those ideas could be used in America.
He must have been blown away to see Gandhi's principles in action on such a massive scale.
I think he was. King was really impressed by how warm and welcoming the Indian people were.
Yeah.
And he saw a connection between their spiritual values and Gandhi's teachings on nonviolence and love.
It's like seeing those ideas come to life,
It is.
In a real tangible way.
But King was also struck by the poverty and inequality he saw in India.
He couldn't know that.
He couldn't, and he saw the parallels to what African Americans were facing in the U.S.
They were both fighting for justice and equality.
They were, and it reminds us that these struggles are all connected no matter where you are in the world.
We're all fighting the same fight in a way.
We are, and King recognized that both racial segregation in America and the caste system in India, they were both rooted in these systems of oppression.
Systems that denied people basic dignity and equality.
Exactly, and he saw Gandhi's nonviolent resistance as a powerful way to challenge those systems.
A way to create a more just and equitable society.
Like everyone.
And that blueprint for change, it didn't matter that it came from a different country or culture.
It transcended borders.
King took it back to America with him.
He did. King's trip to India solidified his commitment to nonviolence.
It gave him new ideas and tactics for the civil rights movement.
Right. He came back with a renewed sense of purpose.
Like he could see the path forward more clearly.
And a deeper understanding of how powerful love could be in overcoming hate.
So Gandhi's legacy isn't just something from the past.
No, it's alive and well.
It's still inspiring people all over the world.
It is. It lives on in the work of activists, organizers, everyday people working to make the world a better place.
It's a legacy that keeps inspiring us.
And challenging us.
Reminding us that change is possible, that hope is essential.
And that we all have a part to play in building a better future.
That's powerful.
It is. Yeah. It's amazing how Gandhi's ideas went global, right? But let's get back to India's fight for independence.
Okay.
We know Gandhi was a huge part of it, but what else was going on that helped the movement succeed?
Never just one thing, right?
Exactly. For one, the rise of Indian nationalism was a big factor. Take World War I, for instance.
Oh, yeah. How did that impact things?
Well, millions of Indians fought for the British in that war.
Wow.
In faraway places for a cause that didn't really feel like their own, you know?
They must have felt pretty disillusioned with British rule after that.
You're right, because they were promised things like more autonomy, more self-governance.
And it never materialized.
Exactly. So it fueled a lot of resentment, a real yearning for complete independence.
It's understandable.
It is. And that discontent showed up in different ways, from debates to outright rebellions.
Do you mean an example?
Well, it was the Ghadar Mutiny, for instance.
What was that?
It was a planned uprising within the British Indian Army back in 1915.
Wow, during the war.
Yeah, organized by the Ghadar Party, a group of revolutionaries, mostly Punjabi Sikhs.
So even before Gandhi's movement took off, there was already a lot of resistance brewing.
Absolutely, a real undercurrent of it. And figures like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, they were already talking about Swaraj, self-rule, way before Gandhi came onto the scene.
Tilak was a strong voice for independence, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. He believed India should be in control of its own destiny.
His famous quote, "Swaraj is my birthright, and I shall have it."
Yeah, powerful stuff.
It became a rally cry for the whole movement.
It perfectly captured the mood at the time, you know. People were done with being treated like second-class citizens.
They wanted change.
They did.
So we've got this surge of nationalism, frustration with the British, this burning desire for freedom.
Right, so the question is, how did Gandhi take all that energy and turn it into this unstoppable force?
Yeah, how did he do it?
Well, for one, he was a master strategist. He knew how to use symbols, how to get people united behind a cause.
Give me an example.
Think about the salt satyagraha. Picking salt, something everyone needs.
Yeah.
It was brilliant.
I guess it connected with people from all walks of life.
It did, because it wasn't just a symbolic act. It affected their everyday lives.
It wasn't just about protesting attacks.
No, it was about asserting their dignity, their self-reliance as a people.
And that image of the Dandi March.
Powerful stuff.
Gandhi leading those thousands of people to the sea to make salt.
It captured the nation's imagination.
It did. Such a simple act of defiance.
But it sent a strong message.
It did.
And it brought the injustices of British rule to the attention of the whole world.
That's incredible.
Gandhi also understood the importance of communication.
Yeah, he was a great speaker.
He was. He knew how to speak directly to the Indian people.
He was authentic. You know?
He was. He used language that resonated with them.
With their values and dreams.
Exactly, and he wasn't afraid to call out hypocrisy.
Whether it was the British or even Indian elites.
He held everyone accountable.
He wanted everyone to live up to their ideals.
He did, and there's another aspect we should talk about, the role of women in the movement.
They were vital, weren't they?
Absolutely. They organized protests, boycotts.
They participated in the Salt Satyagraha. They were imprisoned.
Think about figures like Sarojini Naidu, the poet and activist, or Aruna Asaf Ali, who was a leader in the Quit India movement.
Inspiring women.
They were. They inspired so many others to join the fight.
And it wasn't just women from one part of society, right?
No, it was women from all walks of life, rural villages, urban centers, everyone.
It's incredible.
They challenged traditional roles, you know. They demanded their right to shape India's future.
It shows how inclusive Gandhi's movement was.
Right. It wasn't just about getting rid of the British. It was about creating a just and equitable society for everyone.
It was about dismantling all forms of oppression.
Yeah, so everyone could have a voice, an equal chance.
It's clear that India's independence wasn't a simple thing.
No, it was a complex mix of historical forces, political strategies, individual bravery, and collective action.
It was a whole nation coming together.
And while Gandhi was a key figure,
he was.
It was ultimately the millions of Indians, men and women from all over who made it happen.
They made their own freedom.
They did.
It's powerful, really.
It is. So what's the biggest takeaway for you? From Gandhi's India and the whole idea of nonviolence, what sticks with you?
For me, it's that change is always possible, even when the odds seem impossible.
Yeah.
Gandhi showed us that ordinary people, when they come together for a common goal, they can challenge anything, even powerful systems of oppression.
They can create a more just and equitable world.
It's a message of hope for everyone.
Absolutely. And it's not just about big movements either.
It's about everyday life, too.
Yeah, the choices we make every day in our personal lives, at work, in our communities.
Choosing kindness, understanding, cooperation.
Those are the things that matter.
Gandhi challenged us to live up to our highest ideals.
He did, to never give up hope, to keep working for a better future.
And his legacy is everywhere. Every peaceful protest, every fight for justice.
Every person who strives to live a meaningful life.
His message is timeless.
It is. It resonates with us even today.
Reminding us that we all have the power to make a difference.
To create a world where peace, justice, and compassion are the norm.
That's the true meaning of Gandhi's message.
It is, and we can all carry it forward in our own way.
In our own lives.
Exactly.